Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about, once again, another managerial rumour. It's a man who's been linked with the job through first-hand conversation. This time he has declared that he would be interested, depending on the circumstances. So this is one that I'm very excited about. This is one that I think Celtic should be jumping at the opportunity of. We're going to be talking about a Mr. Jesse Marsch in today's video. Right then, so we start today's video very bluntly by saying I know a lot of people that watch will not know who Jesse Marsch is. They will not know a lot about him, and I would be lying if I said I never knew a lot about him. I knew a lot about him, sorry, a couple of months ago, before things started kind of unravelling that Neil Lennon was not going to be at the club much longer, and we all wanted him to go. Before we started looking at potential candidates to replace Neil Lennon, I never really knew who Jesse Marsch was. And I'll be honest about that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm a mad football purist who reads the Mundial every week and knows exactly who he is and what he does and what he's about. But he's someone who I've started looking into a lot more because he has been a name that's been thrown around with the opportunity for Celtic to go and get, with the chance of us having even just an interview with, to take the role as Celtic manager. And today that became even more of a possibility. Now it's one that I think, and I'll give all my opinions after we talk about what's been said, it's one that I think Celtic should be jumping at. I believe he would be one of the top candidates for the job, and if we have any ambition as a club to move forward both into the modern world and kind of upgrade ourselves, but also to move forward on kind of a European stage, then this is the type of guy you should be going for. This is the manager we should be appointing. Now I've been on the Eddie Howe bus for months now, and I still would say I am, but this is someone who closely rivals him in my mind to be the manager. If not, could be a better option. And we'll talk about all the different things after we talk about what he said that's linked him with the job. So Jesse Marsch was asked about the Celtic job and the links with the job, and I'll read it now, what he said verbatim, so that once again, as I always say, I'm not putting words in the mouth of anyone and I'm not giving you any false information. This is what I have to work off, this is what we'll all work off. So Jesse Marsch in the interview or the press conference said, "Yes, I've heard about the links, it's an honour for me. I always just try to look at it in the terms of what would the project look like. Would we have similar ideas on how to build it in the right way, invest in the academy, invest in young players and create this development process that I'm talking about, and not just focus on winning? Obviously, I know that when Celtic, you're the coach of Celtic, winning is the most important thing. I know enough about it to say, of course, it's interesting." Now these are the words that he's came out with, and we'll come on to every bit of what he said there and how important it is and how promising it is to hear as a Celtic fan. But the fact that he's even said that, the fact that he has uttered these words and said that that's something he would be interested in, if I was in charge of the recruitment process right now, whether that's still Peter Law, whether it's Dominic Mackay, whether it's Dermot Desmond, whoever over at Celtic Park right now should be reading that in the papers this morning and getting right on the phone straight away. At least have the conversation. That's the important part. Look, I understand that it might not be realistic and it might not happen, Jesse Marsch coming to Celtic, but if we don't find ourselves in the place or in the situation where we're at least talking to him, I would be severely disappointed in the club. I feel like it would be yet another fine example of poor management at the top of the board. This is someone that's came out with these words. They should be on the phone straight away to his agent, himself, whoever, and finding out more about his interest in the role at Celtic. Now I will hold my hands up and admit, and I've said this already on Twitter, that if Celtic did manage to get Jesse Marsch, we would be punching well above our weight. I feel like it's a manager who now is making a name for himself to go into, say, a Bundesliga type club. He seems to be getting a lot of attraction over there. A lot of attraction, is that right? He's certainly attracting a lot of clubs over there. We'd be punching well above our weight, but the fact it's been said, we must hold the conversation. I believe that I think he might be the best option out of all the managers to bring us forward as a football club, to move us into the modern world. And I know I've said that about Eddie Howe and perhaps Enzo Maresca, but I think out of the three of them, if you were to pick one and look at what they've done already as a manager, and the way that they kind of coach things and the way they look at things and their ideology of the game, you're potentially looking at the best option for Celtic there if you're wanting to prioritise moving us forward as a club and bringing us up to date with how most modern clubs and most big clubs are run. He could be the best option. So who is Jesse Marsch? We may as well talk about that first before we go any further, because I know there's some amount of people who'll be clicking on this video with no idea whatsoever who he is, what he's about, what his pedigree is as a manager. It's a name that has become very new to Celtic fans over the past few months, and maybe today with this news even newer to some. So we may as well give a brief update as to who he is here on the channel. Now, we have spoke about him very bluntly before, I think, very briefly, I should say. And I think it was like passing comments on him when we were talking about potential managers. But I think he was actually in the last one of the 5 favourites, I'm not sure. We did speak about him anyway, but it's time to speak about him a bit more in depth here. So, if you don't know, he's an American-born manager who's currently managing Austrian side of Red Bull Salzburg over at the top of the Austrian Bundesliga. A side who are about to win their 2nd consecutive title under Jesse Marsch. He's a winner. He's won now what could be 2nd league title. They're 5 clear at the top. It looks as though they will do it. They are the best team in the league after all. Also manager of New York Red Bull before over in the MLS. I think he's a former 2-time MLS Coach of the Year. Someone who is, of course, just very new to the European game, only managing for the last couple of years, but already making a very good name for himself in the continent. Making it through to the last 32 of the Europa League, 2 consecutive seasons in a row. He has done well in European football. For the teams he's came up against in those rounds, it's like the same thing as Celtic. You're basically hoping for luck of the draw when it comes to those. I think Villarreal knocked them out this year. Last year it was Eintracht Frankfurt. It's not easy when you're playing against teams who are as good as that to get through, but someone who's had a good introduction to European football, doing well. He's also coached Rasenballspor Leipzig before as well, so you know he's certainly getting around, and it's getting him touted with big jobs. So we've got to talk about that. What are the realistic chances of him coming to Celtic? So what can we take from his comments? Now, we can take that he's a very ambitious manager. The fact he wants to prioritise and look very deeply into getting this youth sort of set up working successfully is something that I think we're all crying out for at Celtic. Look, I'm not denying, and I never have denied, that Celtic don't produce. I'm not saying we don't produce good young players. Look at Kieran Tierney, look at Cal McGregor, 2 of the best examples in recent years of players who've came up through the ranks of the youth squads and went on to be some of our best players, and now Tierney's down at Arsenal. But compared to how clubs are running around Europe, Celtic are neglecting young talent. We're loaning players out that should be getting chances. When we have games that they should be playing in, we're not giving them chances. You take that example after Dubai. We've started some, but you know, a couple came in and impressed, never seen them again. You've got Dembele sitting on the bench, who's touted as one of the best young talents in the country. You know, all these different things that's happened over the last few years, and especially in loaning players out, hasn't been successful for us. So for a project to be set up for him to come in and help develop that youth academy is something that could help Celtic for years to come. It's not just a thing that happens when he's here for maybe 2 or 3 years. It goes on beyond that. It helps the club moving forward for years, because it puts down a staple in how things should work moving past that to the next manager. It kind of sets the standard for whoever comes in next with a developed youth academy, with players developing through that. So I'm very happy that he's saying something like that. Of course, that doesn't become really relevant unless he gets the job or not, but it's certainly promising to hear statements like that. And look, he needs a team set around him that is similar to how things work in these German football clubs and Austrian football clubs. We're talking director of football, we're talking good coaches, we're talking that setup of the modern football club that Celtic are planning on going the route down, but we need to make it names that are interesting to work with, and names that would make him interested to work with. It can't just be, you know, people saying John Collins touted himself for the job. No, absolutely not. It's John Collins. No way. You don't move backwards, once again, you move forwards. And putting John Collins in that role would be disastrous. I mean, I don't think he is going to get that role. I think we can all agree on that. I think that would be, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at this point, but I think we can all agree it won't happen. But they need to make it a name that makes Jesse Marsch and other managers similar look at it and go, yeah, I want to work with him. That's ambitious. That spells something good over there. Let's go. His statements come out, and tactically a very good manager. Plays a nice brand of football. And look, it's something that I think Celtic have missed out on for the last year, is someone with just any sort of tactical know-how of the game. Doesn't matter if they're an attacking coach or a defensive coach. We need somebody who's going to bring in a clear system that's used every week, that players can get familiar with, that they can alter if need be, but make it familiar to the players so that we don't look lost. It doesn't look as though it's just 11 clueless lads walking around a park every week. And with a systematic change would come in with Jesse Marsch if he was manager. So I think by all means, get it done, Celtic. Get the phone call made. I know we keep throwing around the term manager and such. It's something we need to kind of escape from, because Jesse Marsch would not be per se a manager, he'd be a coach, he'd be the head coach. And of course, we're just so used to here at Celtic saying next manager, who's a manager, who will be manager. It's just that we're used to saying that all the time. But the project that he wants to work in is not that he's a manager, he's a head coach. That's when you get your director of football and you get everything else there in place to make it a kind of, I like the way that Derek Ray put it, saying a sporting division. It's more, we'll see that kind of European setup, especially over in Germany, that come to Celtic, rather than the traditional, this is the manager, he makes the decisions, and Jesse Marsch is someone who'll be focusing purely on what happens on the pitch. And you know what, that's for the best of Celtic. I think it's for the best interest of us moving forward as a club. So what are the chances of Jesse Marsch coming to Celtic? Is it going to happen? Is it something that we can get excited about? Well, the fact he's put his name forward and saying that he's interested and it's an honour to be linked with it depending on what happens and what the situation's like, then we should get excited. Relying on the board though is a different story. We shouldn't get excited about that. Well, can we rely on the board? Will they be able to go forward and make it the calls to make it all happen? I don't know, because we've been let down so many times in the past, and a Rangers fan put it well for me on Twitter today. It's a move that seems to make a lot of sense for Celtic, which is why it won't happen. Because Celtic, the board and the decisions that get made never seem to happen when they make sense for Celtic. So you've got to kind of keep level-headed about it. But in terms of the man himself, he's becoming obviously a more prevalent name now over in Europe, which means his stock is rising, which means that moves are on the horizon for him in the Bundesliga. Now, you've only got to look as far as the fact he's managing Red Bull Salzburg to know that Rasenball Leipzig will be near. That will be something that's an opportunity for him. Also at Borussia Mönchengladbach, Marco Rose is leaving. He's going to Borussia Dortmund, which means there's a role opening up there soon. These were all points brought up by Derek Ray, by the way, good friend of the channel, and that I'm taking from him. But of course, I do like my bit of Bundesliga. So this is all the kind of possibilities that can happen here. So Borussia Mönchengladbach opens up. They will probably be very interested in interviewing him as one of the candidates. Celtic need to nip in ahead of these clubs. I don't know if Gladbach have started the recruitment process yet per se, but there will be certain interest there. Then you look at Hansi Flick over at Bayern Munich, right? He might be going to the German national team role after Joachim Löw leaves post-Euros, which means a role opens up at Bayern Munich, which means the favourite for the Bayern Munich job that has been for the last year or so now, if Hansi Flick leaves, would be Julian Nagelsmann of Rasenball Leipzig, which means if he leaves Leipzig, moves there, the job at Leipzig opens up, which means naturally you would probably see him walk into that role. That kind of makes perfect sense for that man, Mr. Marsch, to walk into the partner club and take over there and continue what the dynasty they've been building is. So there is a certainly interesting element of things opening up in Germany that could really entertain him there, and really sway his decision. So Celtic need to go in and they need to make a phone call today after those comments and get the business done. Simple as that. Easy as pie. I mean, it's not as easy as pie to go, right, come on, you coming, oh, see you there. It's not as easy as that. But they need to start a conversation, outline what's in place, talk about the director of football, talk about visions and such. Just state a little bit of interest. Kind of sway the guy checking out things. This is certainly something we could do. We're a big enough club, for goodness sake. Leipzig have been a football club for what? No longer than 15 years. And Celtic are historically one of the biggest clubs in Europe, for God's sake. And I know we can't compete with Leipzig nowadays, it's just impossible. It's pretty much impossible in terms of money and winning in Champions League and all the rest of it. Leipzig are bigger than Celtic in that state of mind, but we're Celtic. Make the call, outline intentions, try and do something. Anything, Anyway, that about does it. That's my 2 cents on this. I look forward to talking about it a bit more in the podcast, which should be out tomorrow. So let me know what you think about Jesse Marsch. I'm sure it's one that will split opinions once again. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.